Now, what enables us to do that? Here again is where multi-site thinkers come in, because they think about it differently than us. The rest of us are able to tell ourselves that we cheat and will only be temporary because we, I believe, are still caught in the mindset of what I call the baby boomer leadership and economic model mentality. That is, by the way, a completely Scott Tayler made-up phrase. But we all, whether we're baby boomers or not, we're caught in this leadership mind frame. And the reason I describe baby boomers is baby boomers kind of came into leadership. They were the generation that came to leadership in the last 30 years, where we experienced economics in this country that you could always sort of count on a little bit more, right? When you think about before the crash, there was always not a lot, there was no boom, but there was always sort of 30 years of a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And how that cultural economics translated to our churches was you always could count. You know, every year, every couple of years, the pledge drive might dip a little bit, but there was this sense that the pledge drive would slowly always just up and up, a little bit more, a little bit more. And so in that water, whether you're a minister or you're a layperson, you develop a leadership mentality around a management and a leadership mentality around little bits. Your job is to manage and plan for those little bits that will keep coming more and more. And so as my staff team teases me and I drive them crazy, I love alliteration. So I would argue this mentality is characterized by the 3 Ps, right? What you do, if you believe there's going to be little bits, and your job is to manage those, your job, in order to get capacity, to get out of this temporary situation, is to prepare for those little bits, prioritize for those little bits. That's the 5-year strategy plan. We all have them. Like this year one, we're going to increase our director member services by 2%, or this year we're going to have to get a youth person, or next year we're going to get, you see what I mean? We have a 5-year plan for how we're going to do that, and then we're patient. We sit back and wait for the little bits to come in. That's our mentality. Now, multi-site logic says, straight up and boldly, that world of the 3 Ps, that world of the little bits, is dead and gone. That capacity coming from the outside. Remember when I talked early on about a whole new paradigm of capacity? That capacity of little bits believes that little bits will come in from the outside. Money will come in and we just have to manage it. Multi-site thinking says that world, that existence is done. And so they start looking for another way, another vision of where capacity would come from. So here's where we get it, the way multi-site think about it differently. Instead of the 3 Ps, in terms of where capacity comes from, we have the 3 Cs, all right? I promise that's not as annoying as it seems. You will be able to remember them with all this alliteration. So instead of, right, looking for capacity to come from the outside, their big piece is they believe that capacity comes from within and in between, not from without. That if capacity for our congregation, to finding that the money, the resources, to be able to do the things we want to do, to be able to have the level of staffing we want to have, to be able to make the innovations we want to make. Where do we find that capacity? Not from the outside, but from within and in between. And the way you do that is not by prioritizing and being patient and preparing, but by first counting, by looking around between churches and within your church to identify redundancies. And then you consolidate. You take those redundancies and you consolidate them within your church or between your churches, which creates, after you consolidate that, economies of scale that produce capacity, again, from inside, from within and in between, not from without. So let me whip through real quick to just, I think this makes sense, but part of this is, when you put this up on screens, this is so simple, right? But we don't think this way. That's the thing. That's why I want to put this on. We just aren't thinking this way until we get it in front of us. So let me give an example of what this looks like in more detail. So I want to compare two models here. So the old model or the old mindset along with what I'm calling the multi-site mindset. So the interdependent model, this looking for capacity from within and in between, is the interdependent one. The one I'm calling the independent model is the one that's the model, sort of the baby boomer model of we can be independent congregations because capacity will just come to us on our own. I also call, in my more snarky moments, the independent model the Unitarian Universalist Association of siloed congregations. I don't think we notice that that's what we are, but in many ways that's what we are, the Unitarian Universalist Association of siloed congregations. And so in that association, this is what it looks like. We have, and I'm going to use a quick example. Let's look from the sky down on two congregations. You could do this 1,000 different ways, but let's just look down on two congregations that are sitting next to each other. What we have are two ministers, right? Doing 6 sermons a month, 30 hours each, spending 180 hours. Now, I don't know about the ministers in this room, but most of us ministers happen to read a book to prepare for our sermon. Yes? Books take, I don't know about you, but a little longer than 2 hours to read, right? And then you have preparation, and you have design, so at least 30 hours. And if it's a bad week, we're talking 40 or 50-hour weeks on a sermon, but let's just be minimal here. So what we've done as a movement is said, this is a good use of capacity. We will tell these two ministers to sit in their separate studies, work for 30 hours on a sermon, and only do it once, and then put it on a dusty shelf. That's a good use of resources. Multi-site folks say, well, you know what? If you pull those two ministers out of their siloed congregations, put them together as a team, and had both of them serve both congregations, what you would get is two ministers in that month's time who only had to do 3 sermons because they could use it twice and rotate it back and forth, which allows them to do 90 hours of work instead of 180, which allows for other things, right? Other social justice work, the stuff we want, other leadership development work, and even some non and beyond congregation intervention. And did I say intervention? Not intervention, innovation, right? It's like magic. Do you see that? Look at that, right? But there's something about multi-site logic. I feel like sometimes it's like they want to grab us by the shoulders and say, would you look at what are we doing? Think about how we're using our precious resources. And again, we could do this in a whole bunch of different ways. We could do this with our RE professionals, right? 2 RE professionals doing 4 preps a month, where instead you get 2 DREs that work together and around, and you have 2 preps a month, which leave a whole bunch of room for other things. And you could do this with lay leaders. You could do this logic over and over again in many, many different ways. Which means, though, the bottom line is that multi-site's a gift. And their new paradigm for where not just capacity but hope comes from is this simple equation. Same level of staffing, same level of funding, but more programming and impact when you look for capacity within and in between rather than without.